Most women never realize it until it's far too late. The man who once seemed silent, unbothered, or even distant, he felt more than you ever knew. But men, especially those shaped by ancient wounds and hardened egos, rarely speak the truth of their hearts in the present. They wait, sometimes too long, until there's only the echo of a woman left behind. And in that silence, the floodgates open, only inwardly. He'll never tell you what he really felt, but he'll feel it. Oh, he will. In the quiet, in the dark, in the echo of her absence. Because when a woman walks away, truly walks away, she does not just leave the room. She leaves a mirror behind. A mirror that reflects all the things he refused to confront while she stood before him. His ego, his longing, his fear, his unspoken dependence on her emotional presence. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that is exactly what happens to a man when the woman he underestimated finally detaches. He calls it fate. He calls it bad timing. But beneath those labels is a storm of raw, unresolved emotion he never learned to name. He remembers her silence first, not her laughter, not her perfume, not even the curve of her waist beneath the sheets. No, he remembers the way she stopped explaining, the moment she no longer defended her tears, the day her eyes no longer searched his for meaning. That silence wasn't absence. It was thunder disguised as calm. In the beginning, he mistook her need for connection as weakness. He saw her vulnerability as clinginess, her love as something that could wait while he figured himself out. He didn't know that the feminine heart, when it closes, closes forever. Not out of spite, but self-respect. Now, in the vacuum she left, he replays the words he never said, the apologies, the confessions, the craving to be seen beneath his bravado. He realizes in brutal clarity that the woman he once saw as too emotional was actually emotionally sovereign, that her intensity wasn't neediness. It was a call to depth, a call to truth. But his ego, trained to dominate, to detach, to delay, wasn't ready for truth. And now it sits with him like a ghost. He remembers the way she noticed things no one else did, the tired edge in his voice, the way he pulled away during stress, the moments he betrayed himself, not just her. She saw it all and loved him anyway, until the day she stopped, not with cruelty, not with vengeance, with grace. She let go not to hurt him, but to finally hold herself. And now, for the first time in his life, he feels something deeper than attraction. He feels her absence as a presence, as if she's still in the room, watching, not judging, but reminding that he lost something sacred, not because he was unlovable, but because he didn't choose to love with full awareness. Men aren't taught to say these things. They're taught to suppress, to laugh it off, to move on. But the soul doesn't move on. The soul remembers every moment that felt like home, especially the ones we ran from. And she was home, not because she was perfect, but because she saw the imperfect in him and stayed until he gave her every reason not to. But now, in that sacred aftertaste of what once was, something else is born. A reckoning, a hunger not just for her, but for the parts of himself she awakened. The boy behind the man, the ache behind the arrogance, the truth behind the silence. And yet, he'll likely never say it, not to her, because the kind of man who waits until she's gone is the kind of man who learns only in hindsight. The real question is, will he transform? Or will he search for her ghost in every woman who follows, hoping to find again what he let slip through fingers too proud to hold gently? And so, the days pass, not with loud heartbreak, but with quiet hauntings. The kind of ache that doesn't scream, but whispers through the smallest moments. A scent in the air, a song in the supermarket, the sight of a woman laughing with her head tilted in the same way she used to do. He might be with someone else now. He might be laughing, working, living. But Jung knew this well. The unconscious does not forget. The soul keeps a record far more precise than memory. And in the hidden corridors of his mind, she walks freely, untouched by time, untouched by distance. He does not miss the relationship. He misses her essence, her gaze, her chaos wrapped in tenderness. What he once called too much now feels like not enough. Not enough meaning in the conversations he has. Not enough soul in the intimacy he seeks. Not enough depth in the laughter he forces. Because what he had was not ordinary. She was the kind of woman who didn't just love him. She saw him. And for a man carrying generations of armor, that is both terrifying and magnetic. It is the feminine's deepest power, to see what even he cannot face in himself. But to be seen is not the same as being ready. So he hid, he dismissed, he delayed, until she, the mirror, was no longer there to reflect his truth. Now the darkness he refused to meet in her presence comes back with sharper edges. Regret has a peculiar voice. It doesn't yell, it echoes. And every time he sees a woman who almost reminds him of her, he hears it again. You were safe with her, and you let fear speak louder than love. That's the wound he never admits. Not to his friends, not to the new woman who tries so hard to hold him, not even to himself on most days. But it lingers in the way he overthinks before responding to a text. It shows up in the way he half listens, worried that depth will hurt more than it heals. It hides in the tension between who he is and who he could have been if he'd allowed her to love him all the way through. Because she didn't just love the good in him, she loved the broken, the confused, the silent boy behind the man. And when she left, she didn't just take her body, she took with her the sanctuary of being known. This is why obsession often follows detachment, why the feminine becomes myth when she is no longer accessible. Because she becomes what the ego could not conquer, and what the soul cannot replace. He scrolls past her photos now, pretending not to pause. But he pauses, every time. Not because he hopes to rekindle, but because he wants to feel her one more time, even through a screen. Just a glimpse of what was real before he traded it for control. Jung warned us, the shadow holds everything we've rejected, and in her absence, she becomes the greatest projection of his shadow work. Not as punishment, but as invitation. To feel what he never let himself feel. To mourn what he thought he could delay. To face the reality that she was not just another woman. She was a mirror, a storm, a sanctuary, and a teacher. And now with her gone, he begins to learn. Not in the way he wanted, but in the way the soul demands. Quietly, painfully, completely. She will never know the full extent of what he feels, because the man who waits until she's gone is often the one who learns how to feel, only after it's too late to be felt with her. There's a strange kind of torment that comes with remembering a woman too late. It isn't loud, it doesn't arrive all at once. It bleeds slowly in moments he didn't expect her to haunt, like folding laundry, or pouring his morning coffee, or lying beside someone who doesn't reach into his soul the same way she once did. What he feels now is not heartbreak in the romanticized sense. It's disorientation, as if a compass inside him once pointed somewhere clear, and now it just spins in place, always moving, never landing. Because she was direction, not because she told him where to go, but because when she stood beside him, he could finally see himself clearly. But when a man has never learned to receive, truly receive the sacred feminine, he confuses clarity for chaos. He interprets intuition as interrogation. He mistakes her emotional depth for manipulation, her tears for instability, her silence for rejection. And only in hindsight does he realize she wasn't asking him to become someone else. She was asking him to become himself, unarmored. It is no small thing to be loved by a conscious woman. It is an initiation, and not every man is ready. She came with her own wounds. Yes, she wasn't flawless, but she was real. And in a world addicted to masks and performance, he couldn't quite make peace with the rawness of her. It scared him. He thought love should feel like control, like certainty, but she was wildfire. She was river. She was moonlight in the middle of his darkest night. She didn't just touch his body, she touched time. And time bends differently around a woman who knows her soul. Now every woman he meets feels somewhat familiar, but only in fragments. The way one might catch pieces of a melody, but never the full song, and it drives him mad in subtle ways. Not enough to confess, but enough to ache. He won't tell anyone about the nights he still dreams of her, not because he wants her back, but because his soul hasn't figured out how to release the version of himself he was becoming when she loved him. That's the part no one explains to men, that sometimes it's not her you miss, it's you. The man you were slowly awakening into in her presence. The man she saw even when you couldn't. The man who was brave enough to hold her softness, if only for a moment. Jung understood that the anima, the feminine image in a man's unconscious, is not just fantasy, she's a guide. And when he encounters a woman who reflects her fully, he is being offered something divine. But the ego is not trained to surrender to the divine. The ego wants control, wants understanding, and the feminine, by her very nature, resists being understood. She is meant to be felt, and he felt her, didn't he? He felt her in ways that terrified him. She cracked open his numbness. She rattled his emotional indifference. She reminded him that love wasn't about possession, it was about presence. But he didn't know how to stay present. He only knew how to chase or retreat, and so she left. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she finally started loving herself more. And that is the hardest truth for any man to carry. Not that she left, but that he made it necessary. So he scrolls. He wonders. He sometimes writes messages he never sends. And in those unsent words lives a storm of emotion he never had the language for. Words like, "I'm sorry. I was scared. I see it now." You didn't ask for too much. You asked for the truth. But silence is a cruel container for emotion. It preserves everything, even the love he never gave voice to. And still, the world expects him to move on, to be a man, to shrug off love like it was a phase, a chapter, a minor detour. But no one speaks to what happens after the leaving, when the masculine energy that once dismissed her quiet power finds himself haunted not by her presence, but by her absence. There is no ceremony for the man who wakes up too late, no ritual to purge the ghost of the woman who saw him in his wholeness. There is only the slow unraveling, the realization that while the world applauded his detachment, it cost him something rare, something real, something he can't just replace with another body, another laugh, another night. You see, some women are not meant to be loved halfway. They are thresholds, portals, and when a man crosses into their orbit, he is being called into transformation, not comfort, not ease, not safety, but becoming. And that's what he feels now, in this quiet aftermath. The weight of the invitation he declined, the weight of her waiting, her patience, her passion restrained. She held the line for so long, hoping he would meet her there. But you can't wait forever for someone to wake up to their own soul. This is the tragedy of many men, that they do not grieve until the loss is absolute, that they don't speak the truth until no one is listening, that they only confess what they feel when there is no one left to feel it with. Now when he closes his eyes, he doesn't just see her face. He sees her power, her stillness, the way she made space for his chaos, the way she didn't flinch when he showed his anger, the way she still loved him when he showed his emptiness. He thinks of the moments he brushed her off, when her intuition warned him of his own sabotage, when her tears were not manipulation, but messages, when her boundaries were not punishment, but protection. And now he understands. The feminine in her was never meant to obey. It was meant to awaken, but he wasn't ready to rise. Carl Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And she was his soul's mirror. So he ran, not away from her, but from himself. He now walks through life with a quiet ache, not the kind that cripples, but the kind that reminds him of what was offered, what was felt, what was possible. And you, yes, you must know this. If you've ever been that woman, the one who gave, the one who saw, the one who held space for a man too afraid to step into himself, it was not in vain. He may never admit it. He may never say the words, but in the silence of his soul, you live, not as regret, but as revelation. You were the storm he needed, the softness he couldn't handle, the truth he wasn't ready for. And though he'll move on, Though he'll smile, though he'll say it's better this way, his body will remember. His soul will remember. The man he almost became, the love he almost claimed, the woman he now carries, like a whisper everywhere. Time, that relentless sculptor, begins to carve clarity from his confusion. At first, the days were filled with noise, new faces, shallow laughter, work, distractions. But as the noise faded, what remained was not her image, but her meaning, the echo of who he was when she saw him. Not through his defenses, not through his masks, but through the trembling humanity beneath them. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he begins to awaken, not to win her back, not to relive what was lost, but to face himself in the mirror she once held. In that stillness, the grief softens, regret turns to reverence. For the first time, he understands that her leaving was not punishment, it was prophecy. Her silence was not rejection, it was redirection. She had become the threshold his soul refused to cross, and so life carried him to it another way. Through loss, through emptiness, through the aching humility of self-awareness, he begins to see that love is not a possession nor a conquest. It is a mirror for evolution. Every woman who shook him awake, every heartbreak that undid him, was never about her. It was always about the call to meet himself. And in that realization, something sacred returns. He forgives her, not because she wronged him, but because holding on keeps him tethered to an illusion. He forgives himself, not because he deserves it, but because the man who can face his own shadow is the one who finally earns peace. Jung called it individuation, the slow, painful integration of all that we've denied. The masculine learns to hold emotion without shame. The feminine within him learns to trust without losing herself. And through this reconciliation, he begins to love differently, not from emptiness, not from ego, but from wholeness. He no longer seeks her ghost in other women. He no longer tries to prove that he has moved on, because he has finally realized to honor her memory is not to chase her shadow, but to embody the man she once believed he could become. And somewhere, perhaps in another city, another life, she too feels a subtle shift. She doesn't know why her heart feels lighter one morning, why the weight she once carried for him suddenly dissolves. But that is how energy works between souls that once touched truth. When one heals, the other exhales. There will always be a trace of her in him, just as there will always be a trace of him in her. Not as longing, but as understanding. Because some connections are not meant to last forever. They are meant to awaken forever. He has learned the final thing he could never say, that love, at its purest, was never about holding on. It was about transformation, about mirroring each other's becoming until both were strong enough to walk their own paths. And she, the woman who walked away not out of anger, but out of alignment. She carries that truth now like a crown. No bitterness, no regret, only knowing. Because the woman who once lost herself trying to be understood is now the woman who no longer explains. The woman who knows her silence is power, her presence is a lesson, and her worth is not up for negotiation. And somewhere, deep in the quiet of a man's soul, he finally whispers what she always knew, but never demanded to hear. You were never too much. I was just not yet enough. But by then, she is free. And that is the beauty of endings that are really beginnings. They release both souls into who they were always meant to become. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.